On today's episode, the Rockford IceHogs look to close out their best of three play-in series tonight against the Texas Stars. Blackhawks general manager Kyle Davidson joined the Daily Faceoff Rundown Podcast earlier this morning, plus a quick overview on the Hawks' pending restricted and unrestricted free agents this summer. All that and plenty more right here on Locked On Blackhawks.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks. Today is Friday, May 6th. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can find me out on Twitter at JackBushman2, or you could also go and check out my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. And if you're listening to the audio version of today's episode and you like what you're hearing, then please go and show some support first by following the podcast. It'll only take a quick couple of seconds. Literally, just a quick click of the button will help me out tremendously. Go and leave the show 5 stars if you like what you're hearing today as well. And if you're tuning in through Apple Podcasts or through Spotify, then feel free to go and leave me a review. I always greatly appreciate getting feedback from my tremendous listeners out there. And best of all, it's 100% for free wherever you may be listening to your podcast, whether that be through Apple Podcasts, Odyssey, Spotify, Google Podcasts, etc. It's all 100% for free. And if you go and follow the show right now, then you'll be able to get the latest episode as soon as it comes out each day. And if you're not already watching the video version of today's episode, then you got to go and check out Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube, because each and every episode moving forward, folks, is going to have a video version attached to it as well. So if you haven't done so yet, please go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. I would greatly appreciate it. Go and smash the like button for me down below as well. And be sure to turn on those push notifications so that you can be notified whenever the episode gets uploaded to YouTube each and every day. All right, good afternoon, everyone. As always, thank you all for tuning into another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks, and for making the show your first listen here to start off your day. And to open things up this afternoon, folks, let's get into the Rockford IceHogs prepping for Game 2 of their best of 3 play-in series with the Texas Stars later this evening. That's going to be a 7 p.m. Central Time puck drop once again at the BMO in Rockford. And I highly suggest that everyone listening to this episode here today goes and watches Game 2 between the Hogs and the Stars. I know there's a bunch of really good Stanley Cup games that are going to be on later this evening as well. But if you're a true Blackhawks diehard, then you got to go and make time to watch the IceHogs play later this evening as well. Because as I talked about on the show yesterday, with the IceHogs having the third youngest roster in the entire AHL this year, there are plenty of young guys who are going to be making the jump to the NHL level in the next couple of years, getting their first bit of playoff experience as a professional. Lucas Reichel, Michael Tepley, Alec Regula, Ian Mitchell, Jakob Galvis, Isaac Phillips, Arvid Soderblom, just to name a few. There are plenty more as well. But this is just such valuable experience for players like that to understand what it takes to have success in a playoff type of atmosphere when the games matter the most, the emotions are at their peak, the physicality is higher than ever, and it's just a win or go home type of feel with each and every game. There's nothing like it, and it's just such a valuable experience to a bunch of those young kids who are, as I said, hoping to make a lasting impact on the Blackhawks through the next couple of years as they go about this rebuild. So I definitely recommend that you all tune into that game here later this evening. As I said, that's going to be a 7 p.m. Central Time puck drop. I know if you're going to watch, you probably have to do so through AHL TV, unless you can go out and find some sketchy website that you can stream it off of. I'm all for that. But even if you can't, it's still only $29 to purchase AHL TV, and you'll be able to watch every game throughout the Calder Cup playoffs, which hopefully the IceHogs will be part of for at least the next couple of weeks here to ensure that we really get our money's worth. But a couple of key topics for Game 2 that I wanted to mention here on the show today. First, will Andre Altibarmakian and Nicholas Beaudin draw back into the lineup? Both guys were scratched on Wednesday for Game 1. And for Altibarmakian, it was an interesting decision to see him held out of the lineup. I do want to say, I don't know if there's an injury going on for either Alti or Beaudin. I haven't seen anything reported on that, so I'm assuming it's a healthy scratch. But it was curious. I was curious to see Altibarmakian not being a part of the lineup, because down the stretch of the regular season, he found a lot of success on the top line with Lucas Reichel and Michael Tepley. DJ Buzdeker was the one who took Alti's spot on the top line on Wednesday, and those three had a really good show of it. I thought they were probably Rockford's best line from start to finish. So considering that, and also considering the IceHogs came away with a win, I'm guessing that head coach Anders Sorensen probably isn't going to be changing up the top line here tonight, but that also doesn't mean that Altibarmakian can't draw in elsewhere. But for Beaudin, I do feel like out of those two, he probably has the better chance to rejoin the lineup here this evening, based on how the IceHogs have kind of had a revolving door of defensemen in and out of the lineup throughout the course of the season. But to see Beaudin getting healthy scratched in Game 1 of the AHL playoffs, I mean, it has to have you concerned at least a little bit about his future. So hopefully, the Hawks' former first-round pick will be able to get back in there tonight, and we'll be able to find some success on the back end. The last little topic I have is Arvid Soderblom, who played tremendously in Game 1, stopping 33 of the 34 shots that he faced to pick up the win. But with Texas on the brink of elimination here tonight, I'm going to assume that they're going to come out with a pretty strong push, and they're going to be playing with that desperation that we see come playoff time. So I think Soderblom needs to have another pretty sturdy performance in order for the Hogs to come away with a win and to close out this series. And fortunately, Soderblom has been really consistent all year long. He's been a stone wall in net. There was a reason why he was the co-MVP of the IceHogs this year. So I'm not all that worried about his play, and hopefully he'll be backstopping Rockford to round 1 of the official Calder Cup playoffs with another win tonight at the BMO. All right, there's a quick preview of Game 2 between the Rockford IceHogs and Texas Stars. Coming up in just a moment, I will get into Blackhawks GM Kyle Davidson's interview on the Daily Faceoff Rundown Podcast earlier this morning. But first, I need to talk to you all about Athletic Greens and their new AG1 product, which is 1 scoop of AG1. You're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, probiotics, and more to help you start your day. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, your recovery, your focus, and your aging. And Athletic Greens was first created when the founder experienced a ton of gut issues and ended up on a complicated supplement routine in order to recover. That used to cost them $100 per day. But now, Athletic Greens has an optimal and affordable nutrition routine that costs you less than $3 per day, which is such a cheap way to invest in both your health and your body. And I personally use AG1 darn near every morning to get me going. It really does make an impact. I can notice it since Lockdown started sending me these trial shipments, and I'm definitely going to be purchasing more. To make it easy for all you listeners out there, Athletic Greens is also going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL Network right now. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/NHL Network to take ownership over your health and to pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. All right, we're back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast. Moving on into segment 2 here today. Earlier this morning, Blackhawks general manager Kyle Davidson joined Frank Seravalli and Jason Gregor on the Daily Faceoff Rundown Podcast. And I just thought it was a very insightful interview, and I definitely learned a bit more about the Blackhawks' new general manager. So I definitely wanted to share some of the key parts in my mind from that conversation. First, I just really learned a bit more and got more insight on Kyle Davidson and just how involved he was in so many different departments along the way to becoming general manager of the Chicago Blackhawks. Obviously, hearing him talk at his pressers, we know that he's been involved in many different areas in his 12 years with the franchise. But I just thought it was really cool to hear him sort of discuss his come up and everything that uh, led to him being in the spot that he is right now. And first off, I don't know if I just missed this or what, because Davidson said that he mentioned this in his introductory presser. So maybe I'm just deaf. I don't know. But I did not know that Kyle has undergone 3 different open heart surgeries in his life. Apparently, he was born with heart issues. I had no idea about that. So, just another amazing obstacle that he's been able to overcome to get to where he is today. But first, what I learned about Kyle, other than that, was how he first got his start in hockey. He first began with the Sudbury Wolves of the OHL, kind of in an internship job where he was working in the day-to-day operations of the game and basically was doing, everything that he was told to do. And then after that, after getting his first hockey job, if you will, with Sudbury, he graduated college and found himself having an internship with the Rockford IceHogs. But I guess he was having some sort of visa issues or something like that. It was kind of complicated when he was describing it. I think he was able to travel to Rockford, but there were some concerns about whether or not he'd be able to stay there or the possibility of having to make the trip back to Sudbury. It just left him in a weird predicament. But I guess while that was going on, a job opened up for the Chicago Blackhawks. A position had been left vacant, and Kyle ended up getting that job. So while he was in limbo because of visa issues with the Ice Hogs, he ultimately ended up landing uh, a job with the Hawks. So that was really, his start, kind of a lucky crack with the Blackhawks organization. And then, of course, it's all history from that point on. And on the podcast, Davidson talked about just all the different areas that he's worked in over the past 12 years. And he started off by working in the so-called analytics department, if you will, back in 2010. That was when analytics weren't really a big part of hockey at all. And I mean, compared to the other professional sports here in North America, they're still really not all that involved in the game, but they're starting to become more and more prevalent as the years go by. But Davidson's analytics job was literally to watch each pass that the Blackhawks made and then to evaluate those, find out which players are moving the puck well together and are having success, who isn't, what type of passes, what area passes are working. And then he would take that back to the front office so that they could try and maybe implement some more of that type of stuff in their game. So that was the first job that Kyle really had with the Blackhawks. And then he started to get involved with the CBA and the business side of things, learning all the rules that go into the salary cap, LTIR, the roster limits, all that good stuff, which I'm sure has been very helpful to him now as the general manager. But then that's how he started transitioning to the business side of things. And then he also began to spend some more time with the Ice Hogs. He would travel to games and watch them play, a little bit of scouting, a little bit of management. So that's kind of how he started to work his way up into the Blackhawks organization. I just thought it was really cool to kind of hear him share how many different jobs he held and kind of the route that he went down before getting hired in this position and really being the head guy now of the entire franchise. 2 other things that stood out to me in particular from this conversation with Davidson and Seravalli and Gregor. One was when Kyle was talking about his relationship with Norm MacIver, because Kyle said that Norm, more so than anyone else, was really the one that he looked up to when he first got his start. And he shared a cool story about how he and Norm started to become close. Norm actually asked Kyle if he wanted to go on a trip with him to St. Louis to watch a game between the Stars and the Blues, as Kyle remembers it, which is pretty crazy that he still remembers the game. But when Norm asked him that, he was like, yeah, obviously, of course. And then in that 4-hour drive from Chicago to St. Louis, which I just had to make there and back literally this past weekend. That's how I know it's roughly about 4 hours. It's probably 4:30 if you're a right lane driver, but if you're willing to risk it to get the biscuit and push up into those 80 and 90 mile per hour figures, it's a little bit closer to 4. But in that drive to St. Louis, Kyle talked about how he was just picking the brain of Norm, asking him about a bunch of different things. They had a bunch of different topics of conversation. And then really ever since then, ever since that experience, they've just only been getting closer and closer and closer. And that ultimately, led to the decision by Kyle to bring Norm MacIver back. And obviously, with those two being so close, it only makes sense. But I thought it was also kind of neat to hear Kyle open up and be honest about how he felt. He needed to add that executive experience around him up in the front office. Being the youngest GM now in the NHL, and well, he does have 12 years of experience. A lot of those were at some I don't want to say basic jobs, but some, I don't even want to say lower jobs, but he doesn't have much experience being in the upper echelon of the front office, if you will. So I just thought it was cool to hear Kyle be that honest, and that's kind of, that relationship, and also knowing that Norm's been very successful in that side of things for a while now, ever since his playing career has been over. So that's, kind of why Kyle felt it just made too much sense it made too much sense. I don't even know how to word that. It was just obvious that he felt he needed to bring Norm MacIver back and have that experience beside him. The other cool part of this interview that I thought was when Davidson also opened up about something else, about how the Blackhawks, he needs help getting better in the analytical side of things. That was one thing he was going to have a focus on, even without Greenberg. That was one of his first missions, was to kind of be better in that area. And then once he was named the permanent general manager, he actually received a text from Greenberg, and they kind of had a little back and forth conversation. Greenberg congratulated him. They started talking a little bit. That led to a phone call between the two. And then in that phone call, Jeff was kind of describing to Kyle all the systems and the analytical approaches and the data tracking that they have with the Chicago Cubs. And the Blackhawks just simply don't have those things. And with Kyle, even before talking to Jeff, wanting to get better in those departments, hearing Jeff talk about all those things, he was kind of like, oh my God, I need to have this guy. So I just thought it was cool to hear Kyle, how that whole thing transpired, right? Because Kyle recognizes that the Blackhawks have been piss poor in both, in terms of analytics and also in terms of in terms of player development, which Greenberg is going to be aiding in as well. It was just cool that Kyle had that conversation with Greenberg, just a basic conversation. And then it ultimately led to Jeff now becoming the associate general manager of the Chicago Blackhawks. Through those conversations, Kyle just realized that Jeff was the perfect guy to be leading this venture and to get the Blackhawks more involved in systematic data tracking and in analytical approaches. All right, there are some of the interesting tidbits that I thought that I found from Kyle Davidson's appearance on the Daily Faceoff Rundown Podcast this morning. Coming up in just a minute, I will go over a brief overview of the Blackhawks pending restricted and unrestricted free agents this summer. But first, I need to talk to you all about BetOnline. It's that time of the year again, folks, as baseball season is finally upon us, and BetOnline has way more odds and info, from game scores, totals, player performance props, to where the next fired manager is going to land or who the first fired manager is going to be this year, regardless of what you want to bet on, BetOnline remains the number one spot for all sports betting here in 2022. It's not just baseball. From the NBA and NHL playoffs, esports, boxing, UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games, do not wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2022 season. BetOnline is both the fastest and the easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports and your favorite Vegas casino games. BetOnline, where the game begins. Welcome back to the Locked On Blackhawks podcast. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Getting into segment 3 now today before I wrap things up. I also wanted to be sure to talk about the Blackhawks pending restricted and unrestricted free agents this summer and what the plans could be for each of them. Because we've heard Davidson talk a couple of different times now about how they're probably not going to be all that active in the free agent market this summer. They don't want to be just handing out term. So I have a feeling that these players, the unrestricted free agents and the restricted free agents, are really going to be the key decisions that have to be made this summer, aside from Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane, of course. But first, for the unrestricted free agents, there are 4 of them in Calvin DeHaan, Erik Gustafsson, Kevin Lankinen, and Colin Delia. And for the defensemen, I've talked about this many times on the show for the last couple of months, but for a couple of different reasons, financially and in terms of the depth at the position. Both DeHaan and Gustafsson are 99.9% gone by the time summer rolls around. Obviously, DeHaan is clearly the more valuable of the two, but considering A, how much he's going to cost on the market, B, the pipeline of defensemen that the team has right now, a lot of youngsters coming up from Rockford in the next few years, and C, the direction that the team is heading in, it doesn't make sense to bring back a veteran D-man like DeHaan for that amount of money. For Gustafsson, there are plenty of reasons why he should already have played his final game in a Blackhawks sweater, and maybe even at the NHL level for that matter, because he's just simply not good enough offensively for how little defense he provides. So, yeah, I'm going to say 100% positive that Erik Gustafsson is not going to be coming back next year. But in goal, I think this is going to be the most interesting discussion of the UFAs because for both of them, they're interesting scenarios. I'll start with Colin Delia. I got to admit, there's probably no chance that Delia is going to be willing to re-sign with the Blackhawks unless he's guaranteed the number 1 job next year. But even then, considering how Delia has been handled the last few years, I don't think he's going to be all that trusting of the organization. You got to remember, the start of 2 years ago now, the COVID shortened season, Delia was looking like he was going to be the starter for the Chicago Blackhawks after Corey Crawford was traded to New Jersey and then ultimately retired. Delia looked like he was going to be the guy, but then Kevin Lankinen ended up kind of getting off to a hot start, taking the job and running with it. And then ever since, Delia's played in maybe 9 NHL games, 10 NHL games, something like that. He's basically been buried in Rockford for the last 2 years. So even if he would be guaranteed the starter, I don't know that he's going to be wanting to come back to this organization. So I have a pretty good feeling that Colin Delia is going to be gone in the summertime. But for Kevin Lankinen, this is going to be really interesting because as a UFA, he is going to have his say in the matter, but I really don't think he's going to be offered a number 1 job anywhere else besides Chicago. In all likelihood, probably not. So if he wants to be the guy, if he wants to be a starter come opening night, then he should be wanting to come back to Chicago. But you never know. Maybe he feels he has a better opportunity somewhere else or has a better chance of being a starter with a different team. Who knows? But I do definitely feel like it's more likely that Lankinen is going to come back than Delia at this point. But there is still the possibility that both of them wind up on other NHL teams for the beginning of next season. As for the restricted free agents, there are 5 of them in Dominic Kubalik, Dylan Strome, Kirby Dach, Philip Kurashev, and Caleb Jones. I'll start off with Kubalik and Strome. to be honest, I do feel like it's pretty likely that they're going to come back. Both of them are going to come back with the Blackhawks next season after Davidson elected not to trade them at the trade deadline. Considering the summer, the market more than likely is not going to be as high as it was back then. And also, with the state of the Blackhawks, you got to feel like they're not going to be very good next year. I hate to break it to you, folks. If that's breaking news, I feel bad. But they're probably not going to be very good next year. And considering their contract situations, I do feel like it would be more beneficial to let them both kind of go at it again next year. And then you'll have maybe a little bit more of an accurate depiction of what type of players they're going to be for the remainder of their careers. I do feel definitely like there's a better chance of Strome maybe inking a longer term deal. But for Kubalik, I think it especially makes sense for him to just get a 1-year contract and to come back, because if he does struggle again next year, then he's going to have more trade value as a UFA than he would as an RFA at this past year's deadline, because if the Blackhawks were to move him back in March, he would be guaranteed at least $4 million from another NHL club. Now let's say he goes out there and, puts up kind of the same numbers that he did this year. He's not going to be guaranteed $4 million after that. He's going to be a UFA and there's no money guaranteed to him. So another team would probably be more willing to take a gamble on him at 1.5 million or 2 million or whatever it may be. So contractually, I do believe it makes more sense for the Blackhawks to keep them at this point and kind of let them go about it again next year, unless they're absolutely wowed with an offer, a trade offer this summer. But if that doesn't happen, then I do expect both of them to be receiving contract extensions. As for Doc and Kurashev, I think both of them are probably going to be inking bridge deals. For Doc, whether you like him or not, yes, he has struggled so far in his young NHL career, but the Blackhawks aren't going to be they're not going to let him walk for free. I mean, that just wouldn't make any sense at all. So that's not going to happen. And then for Kurashev, he also did have his struggles this year. It was certainly an up and down campaign. He played a lot better, I'd say, in the last month or so, probably his best play of the entire season. But one thing to consider, Blackhawks fans, is that out of all the fourth round picks in the 2018 NHL draft, Philip Kurashev is the only one of them to have over 100 games played at this point of his career. And he's still only 22 years old. He's only going to be 23 next year. Maybe, he doesn't quite have the top 6 upside that we were hopeful for. But he's still very young, probably younger than a lot of Blackhawks fans realize. And I do feel like he has a lot more still to offer than we've seen so far in his young career. So I do fully expect Kurashev to be getting probably a bridge deal this summer along with Kirby Dach. And then for Caleb Jones, this is the one where I really have no idea what's going to happen. Obviously, his older brother Seth is going to be a big part of the rebuild here. And we heard Seth in his end of the season presser say how he really hopes that the Blackhawks get a deal done with Caleb. And one thing that I did think of, Seth has handled the situation that he's found himself in very well. He stepped up in the second half of the year, according to King, and became more of a leader. We've heard him talk about how he's on board with this rebuilding process, even though internally he's probably not too happy that this isn't the situation that he expected to be in if you asked him a year ago when he first got traded to Chicago. But he's handled it really well, and he said all the right things. He's been good about it. And I do wonder if the Blackhawks maybe try to bring Caleb back just to make Seth happy. But with Kyle Davidson now as general manager and not Stan Bowman anymore, this is, Caleb doesn't have ties to Kyle Davidson. He had ties to Stan Bowman. That was the one who brought him here. That's the one who got him from the Edmonton Oilers. So I feel like Davidson's not going to be thinking that way. And when you throw that out of the picture, I just feel like there simply isn't going to be room for Caleb Jones moving forward. As I've talked about, a lot of defensemen are going to be coming up in the next few years. I will say that, Caleb's offense has been a breath of fresh air on the back end, and he actually tied Seth for the most goals among Blackhawks defensemen this year. But on the defensive side of things, he certainly still had his struggles there as well, and probably didn't progress as well as the Blackhawks had hoped for in that department. So it's going to be a tough decision one way or the other, because he still is relatively young and doesn't have all that much NHL experience, just over 100 games. But at the end of the day, he doesn't have any ties to Kyle Davidson, and I just simply don't know if there's going to be room to bring him back in the offseason. So if I had to lean one way or the other, I'd probably guess that Caleb Jones, excuse me, is going to be the lone Blackhawks restricted free agent who is not going to be getting a contract offer in the summer, but we'll see. All right, folks, I think that is going to wrap up Friday, May 6th episode of Locked On Blackhawks. Thank you all again for tuning into the show, and be sure to go and follow the Locked On Blackhawks podcast on your favorite podcast app and to subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube, and you'll be able to get the latest episode as soon as it comes out each day. And after the show, be sure to go and check out the Locked On NHL podcast for all the latest info on every team that's taking part in the Stanley Cup playoffs. It's free and available on all platforms, so be sure to check out Locked On NHL right now, wherever you get your podcasts. Once again, thank you for tuning into today's episode. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can find me out on Twitter at JackBushman2, or you could also go and check out my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. And for any questions at all regarding anything related to the Blackhawks or to the show, feel free to email lockedonblackhawks@gmail.com. You could also hit me up on any one of my Twitter accounts, or you could call 708-653-0572 to leave a voicemail. So until tomorrow's episode, yes, there is going to be an episode tomorrow where I go over a full breakdown of Game 2 between the Rockford IceHogs and the Texas Stars. But until then, thanks for tuning into the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.